This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Any questions, guys? Anyone? Any questions that I can take before we can get started? Anyone? Any? Yes. Okay. What is synchronously and asynchronously? Yes, I'll take that. Yes. Any more questions? Mm-hmm. Correct. Okay. There would be a point about latency. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Uh, Microsoft will take the liability to make sure that the service is back up and running. Yes, the liability is on them because they are giving you or they are providing you the service. So yes, there is a liability, and that's the reason you have the SLA basically that you are signing a contract with Microsoft and etc. Yes, they have to. They have to. Yes. Yes. Any more questions here? Anyone? Any more questions here? All right. So synchronously and asynchronously, let's get into that. Let's start creating a storage account today again because I don't have one. I deleted yesterday, so let me go and create this out. So let me go ahead start creating a new resource group. I'll say this is a storage RG, and I'm creating the resource group right from here. I'm not going ahead and creating the resource group separately. I'm just going ahead and creating the resource group right from here. I'll say OK. And in here, let me type in the name of the storage account. Again, name 3 to 24 characters should be unique, no special characters and etc. So let me say something like dev irctc USE2, and let me form a name. Let's say go ahead and form a name out here. After that, I'll say that the performance is standard. It's a standard performance storage account that I do have, which means that I will get something called as a HDD hard drive. And the reason that I was telling yesterday that most of the customers actually go here and not into, let's say, the premium is firstly because premium storage account is not available in all the regions that you want. Secondly, this is what happens if you go to premium. Let's say I go to something called as EastUS2 and I'll say I want a premium storage account out here. As and when I do a premium storage account, we'll talk about what are blobs and all that stuff. I'll just scroll down. There is something called redundancy. I'll just click on this one. And do you see what is the option that you do have? LRS. So premium storage accounts are only and only offered in one particular, let's say, redundancy called LRS. You do not have something like ZRS or GRS and etc. That is offered to you when you go for something known as a premium storage account. So it is redundancy versus performance always. So if you want data faster, yes, go for let's say go for premium. But in that case, you'll have to compromise upon the redundancy option wherein you're only going to get something known as LRS out here, and you cannot go ahead and let's say give something called GRS and all these things out. So let me switch it back to let's say standard, and in here these are the options that are available like LRS, GRS, ZRS, GZRS, and etc. And this is the question: is that what do you mean by synchronously out here? So let's look at that. So let's see by the definition of it. Now it's now telling LRS is a low cost option and it's telling that it will create 3 copies of your data in the primary data center, which means that you are giving 1 copy or 1 file. That file is being let's say multiplied let's say 3 different times out here, and 3 copies are done in the single data center out here. So synchronously here means that the second you give 1 copy, Microsoft will go ahead and divide this into 3 different copies or copy it 3 different times out here, which is called a synchronous operation, which means happening at the same time, happening at the let's say very same second out here. It's always about synchronous versus asynchronous. Asynchronous not happening at the same time. It will take some time. So LRS and ZRS support something called as synchronicity or synchronous options out here. Then you have GRS and something called GZRS, which has something called as what asynchronicity out here, meaning these are asynchronous in nature. Also, someone was asking me yesterday is that if you go back, there is something called as make read access data available in the event of region unavailability out here. What does exactly it means out here? Let me click this option out and let me say LRS. This option is completely disappeared for LRS. If I go for ZRS, there is no option like that. If I go for GRS, that's where I have the option out here as such, which means Microsoft is giving you an option telling that, you know what, when you create a storage account in GRS, especially in geo redundant storage, which is like GRS out here, there are two things that gets created. One copy gets created, or yeah, one thing that happens here is in the primary data center. So one of the or three copies basically that you get in the primary data center out here, and three more copies is something that you get in the secondary data center. Two different things out here, and two data centers are very far from each other. Let's say your files are in the primary data center out here. I'll just put some diagram for file out here. So you have a file here. At the same time, what Microsoft does is that Microsoft asynchronously replicates this file into a secondary data center. Now you're a user going to an application called IRCTC. This application is going into the primary data center out here. We call it as a primary endpoint or the primary data source, which is your primary data center as such. It goes here, gets the data, sends it back to the storage, and then storage goes ahead, sends it back to the user out here. So this is the model in which it operates. Yes, go please. Storage? Yes. That is not intelligent. Okay, when you say that is not intelligent, what exactly do you mean? Can I? Mm-hmm. Okay. Correct. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Correct. When I say whatever data will come to the storage, see, storage is nothing but an abstraction of your underlying server. Storage and the server are one and the same. Storage is just the front face of a backend server out here. So it's nothing but a medium through which you are reaching to that particular backend server and you are getting your data. It's like that particular medium out there. That's it. So when I say storage account, I'm just telling storage account is communicating with the backend server, which means this is nothing but a simple application that Azure is giving you, using which you're grabbing your data. Okay, getting it? Was that your question? So yes. So coming back to it, this is the model in which basically it is operating, wherein you're a user going into the application called storage account. Storage account is getting the data from a backend, let's say, data center out here, which is a primary data center. Let's say East US2 in my case. Now, in case of region unavailability, meaning if this is not available because of some region, the data center has crashed, some reason out there, what you can do is that you can go for an option called failover. In this case, what you do is you make sure that instead of that particular IRCTC application going to primary, you're asking it to go into secondary and get the data out here. If you want this to happen, you need something called as a read access over the secondary data center. And that's the reason you have an option called RAGRS, which is read access geo redundant storage, or RAGZRS, which is read access geo zone redundant storage. So now you're telling Microsoft that yes, I need a read access over, let's say, my secondary data center. So just in case of region unavailability, my data can still be read. I'm not telling write. Write, you cannot have it over a secondary data center. Microsoft controls the write. You can only have a read out here. So this is a readable copy in case of some kind of a disaster that will occur into your primary data center out here. This is what Microsoft really tells you when they tell it is RA, read access out here for the secondary center out here as such. So having that said, I'll just go ahead and okay, I'll just go ahead and create this in LRS to begin with. Again, as I said, you cannot change the name, neither you can change the location, neither you can change the performance after you create the storage account, but you can change the redundancy after you create the storage account out here. So with that, I'll then go to next, and in the advanced, this is what I want to, let's say, explicitly talk about is that just scroll down. There is something called security. I'm good with that. I'll just scroll down and there is something known as access tier. There is this particular option called access tier out here. Two different things called hot and cool. It's telling hot is for frequently accessed data, day-to-day use scenario. Cool is for infrequently used data and for backup scenarios out here. Which means Microsoft is now telling that, you know what, please decide what kind of a data you want to put inside this particular, let's say, storage account out here. For example, let's say same storage account, but let's say we are using this particular storage account for an application called ICICI, let's say ICICI banking application or any kind of a thing out here, wherein as a customer, what I can do is that I can, let's say, grab all my unstructured data in the form of banking transaction reports or pay, I mean, let's say all these things, reports and all that stuff. So what I can do is I can go into that particular ICICI, let's say, website or ICICI mobile application, and I can request for my, let's say, bank statement for the next 1 month, for the past, let's say, for the past 1 month out here. It goes into this particular storage account, gets all your data depending upon where your data is, and gives this back to you. Now, every time you do this operation, wherein you're going and getting the data, you're paying a charge to Microsoft. This is called read operation. Meaning you as a customer are going ahead, reading that particular data out here, getting that data. So I as a banking organization who is, let's say, created this particular storage account, every time you do this, I need to pay something known as a transaction charge to Microsoft. Transaction charge or transaction fees. This is something that I pay. So I don't only pay to store the data, I also pay to access my data out here. Two things that is happening. So there is this particular scenario. So now Microsoft is telling that, okay, fine, you know what? If your data is being accessed very frequently, like daily transaction reports, monthly transaction reports, yearly transaction statements, and all that stuff, do one thing, put this in hot. If this is put in hot, the cost per a transaction, meaning whenever a customer goes ahead and accesses the data, the cost per a transaction is low. So I won't charge you so much for a transaction. You are okay with that. But provided don't store like super huge data here. Place your data, but if you are storing like terabytes and petabytes of data, that's where the issue comes in. Wherein if you put very high data in hot, the cost per GB of storage is high. So I as a company now gets to decide, okay, fine, what is the volume of data that is being accessed frequently? I'll only take that volume and place this inside hot so that I can control the cost that I pay per month. Then it says cool. See, I also have as an organization people very rarely wants to go back, let's say about 5 or 6 years, and want to, let's say, see that back in 5 6 years this day what transaction did I make. Very highly unlikely, until and unless you are running a very big business and all that stuff. Very highly unlikely. For this particular scenario, Microsoft tells that okay, fine, these are the customers who are very less likely to go ahead and get their data. It's not a daily, let's say, scenario. If that is the scenario, then place your data into something called cool, infrequently being accessed. So in a cool, the scenario is reversed. The cost per GB of data storage is less, but the cost per a transaction is higher. Meaning, if you want to, let's say, read a data or write something into, let's say, a data that is sitting in a cool tier, the cost is high. So again, going back to our pricing calculator that we were doing yesterday. So if I go back here, if I say Azure pricing calculator out here, and let's go into the pricing calculator. And I'll remove one of my storage accounts. Let's see. Okay. Let me come back again. Let's go back here. And yes. So let's say I put this in ECS2. Let's say I say this is a standard. And let's say I say this is an LRS. I'll start with an option called LRS and access tier being hot. And let's say the capacity is somewhere around 1000 GB. Let's put the capacity same thing as 1000 GB out here. Let's also change the currency value. Okay, where is that? Let's go down. Yes, the right hand side column. Let's put this INR and just let's say go back again. All right, so 1000 GB, the monthly cost that you need to pay is somewhere around 1470, and it is telling you 3 rupees charge for every 10,000 write operations. Meaning, if you are writing the data 10,000 times, meaning if you are updating the data 10,000 times, the charge here is around, let's say, 3 rupees for every 10,000. And if you do 10 into 10,000 operations, which is around 1 lakh operations, the charge here is 39 rupees or 39.95 rupees for all these things. But apart apart from this, you also need to pay for the storage cost of it, which is 1470. Then you have something called read operations, and for every 10,000, read operations is around 30 paise, something like that. So here the cost is somewhere around 3 rupees 20 paise. If you are sitting in something called as hot, what if I change this to something known as cool? Let's see. The storage cost almost half the price. So in hot, the storage cost was what? 1472 rupees. Here it is around 800 rupees out here. But the price that you pay for a write operation, it spiked up. This was around 39. Now this is 79. And read, this was around 3. This was around now 7. So it almost spiked up 2.5 times than what it was earlier. Now you get to decide whether you want it in hot or whether you want this in cool. Is your data sitting in hot or is your data sitting in cool? Depending upon the kind of business that you are into, whether your data is being accessed frequently or infrequently, you can choose one of the available options out here telling that, okay, fine, I want my storage in hot, I want my storage in cool out here. I'll go next to networking. And this is one of the most important options that is, let's say, considered in a storage. But if I explain it right now, it'll really bounce back because I need to, let's say, explain something called virtual networking and then come back to this one. So let's leave it here. I'll say data protection. We'll talk about that once we get inside the storage. Encryption, let's leave it right now. I'll say tags, again, optional in nature. Finally, I'll go do something known as review and create this out. So I'll review and create this out. And Microsoft is running something known as a final validation. And once it's done, I have the create button right now enabled. I'll go ahead, hit the create deployment button out here. This will go ahead and start creating something known as a storage account for me, like we did yesterday. And once this is created, we'll go inside this today. Just a second. Yeah, once this is created, we'll go inside this today and see what are the other options that are available. Yes, go ahead, please. Hmm. Okay. Out of the hot or cool, you mean? So in a live environment, we use a combination of it. So we don't do hot or cool. Like normally, we when we create the storage account, we place it in hot initially. But later, when you place your file, you can decide whether that file is hot or cool. So we'll also talk about that scenario. And we also talk about scenarios like, let's say, how do you manage the life cycles of your file? Whether they want to sit in hot or whether they want to sit in cool, or how do you want to manage them, and etc. Yes, this is also something that you can change after you create. Yes. So the redundancy and access tier is something that you get to change after you create it out. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 Yes. Based on it. Correct. Okay. Correct. Every month you have to pay the billing cycle. Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. It also, yes, depends upon that. Reason being that is your what do you say, the support pricing that they're talking about. So Azure also provides licensing. That, let's say, if you take an Azure licensing, if you have a licensing, they'll say, okay, fine. If you have that particular yearly reservation license, their cost will slightly reduce because you've already paid for the license cost and all that stuff. But usually, it's a monthly billing cycle that we kind of fall under. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. It is possible provided you are maintaining that storage account for the next 2 years. Like for example, you are maintaining, yes, yes, for sure, because you are holding your data, right? So you're not doing anything, but you're holding your data, and there's a cost to hold your data. So there's a cost that you need to pay to, let's say, hold and reserve your data out there. So yes, yes, there is that particular payment method that you fall under. But yes, you can retain your data for a longer period of time, and then you can, let's say, for as you said, if you want a future purpose, you want to pull your data, then yes, you can pull your data at a future purpose as such. No problem. Yes,
Yeah,
any more
hi
questions here?
Kiran.
Good, please.
Yeah, I got not a question, I got a request.
Okay.
While answering offline questions, can you
Hmm.
repeat the question so that we can understand what you're answering for?
Sure, definitely. I'll try definitely doing that because yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Hi, good
Yes.
morning. Deepak this side.
Yes, Deepak, go ahead, please.
Uh, I just want to know what is the main difference between hot and cold?
Hmm.
What is the main
Can you
difference
come on?
between
Okay,
hot and
what is
cold?
the main difference between hot and cold? It's the
Yes.
pricing model that differs between hot and cold out here. So
What
in
exactly
hot,
we are doing in hot?
you are storing your data in hot. When you say it is
And
hot,
and
you're
in
just
cool?
storing. You are storing data, but when you are storing data, Microsoft is asking you what kind of a tier you want to store this in, whether is it hot or whether is it cool. And when you say cool, the cost that you pay per a GB is actually less. Both are
No, that I
storage tiers.
understand. That I understand.
Yes.
Hot and cold
Mhm.
both are storage tier, but why there are two? Because both are doing the same thing. Both are storing the data, right?
Are they? I mean, are they both doing the same thing? Not really. They're not really doing the same thing out here. They're giving you options to store your data. They're not same. They differ.
Mm-hmm.
They differ in their pricing model, and they differ in the way they operate. Imagine you have 5,000 terabyte of data out here. You want to
Mm-hmm.
put, let's say, about 5,000 GB of data. Let's
Okay.
say put 5,000 out here, okay? See the number, which is cool. The cost that you pay to Microsoft to store your data, which is around what? 4,000 rupees. Let's say, to go with your
Yes.
point, if both are doing the same thing, I'll put this in hot. Would you see the cost difference that I'm now paying right now? Do you see a difference in
This
the
is only I'm
cost?
not able to understand. This is only I'm not
Mhm.
able to understand.
Okay,
Hot.
what is that you're not able to understand here?
Uh, Please correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm
Hmm.
going in hot, okay,
Okay,
I am using on day by day. Is that?
okay,
I'm not
correct. You're
storing any
using,
data over here.
if you're not storing the data here, then how will you use it on a day by day basis? When you say you're not storing, let's do this. When you say you're not storing out here, how will you then say that, okay, fine, I'm using the data out here? You have to store your data somewhere, and that's where storage account is providing you a service to store your data. Storage account is now telling, how do you want to store your data? Is it a daily access basis? Meaning, is it something that you're accessing daily? Then go ahead, do a hot. No, it's something that I just want to store it for a future purpose. Do something called cool.
Okay,
You
okay.
will
This is only I
pay less.
wanted to know.
Hmm.
Like if I want to access on daily basis, I can choose hot, and if I want to just store it and keep it for future purpose, I can use it as a code, right?
Cool, correct, correct.
Yeah. And sorry, yesterday you said that we'll be meeting after 6 p.m., but I waited. I did not receive any link.
I sent you an email also that I couldn't do yesterday. So I actually sent you a follow-up email at around 7 or something. That my schedule was a
Okay,
little
can we
tight.
connect tomorrow? Tomorrow is Saturday
Uh,
or
I would
today?
do say, I mean, yeah, today I would do, I'll be okay with that. I mean, since it's a Friday, today I'll be okay. So I'll just send you across an email after 10:30 in the morning, and I'll just schedule some time with you. Okay.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, just check your email. I just put a follow-up, so I was waiting for your reply back again on that.
Okay, I'll do that. I think it went on spam. I have not received any email yet. Most.
Okay, I did a follow-up on your email out here, so just check that out, and we'll connect on
No,
the same
I have not received any.
thing. Okay,
Yesterday at 9 p.m. also I checked, and now also I have not received any. I think there is some issue.
sure, I'll check that.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes. Any more questions here? Archive is the last option that is available. Archive very simply means that you just want to store it, you don't want to access it, nothing. So if you click on this one called archive, let's see, for cool you are paying somewhere around 4,000 rupees. I'll just put this in archival tier. The cost that you pay is like drastically less. So if you just want to store your data, not access it at all, then you go into archive. But your question can be, where I can I see archive while creating it out? You don't see archive while you create it out. You would see archive when you, let's say, upload a particular file out here, which we'll talk about on how do you do that management and all these things out here. All right, so I created this storage account, and now I'm inside the storage account out here, and in the left hand corner, the very first blade that I do have is the overview, telling that, okay, fine, this is the overview blade and all that stuff, wherein it is telling me what kind of a resource group my storage account is sitting under, and what is the location my storage account is under, the subscription my storage account is under, the subscription ID, the status, the disk state. It's telling the disk state is available, storage account is ready, So you can start writing the data, and then you have the performance, which is standard, and then you have the replication, which is LRS, which is local redundant storage. Then there is something known as account kind, which is storage v2 provisioning status succeeded, created, on so on and so forth. I created this around, let's say, 722. It's also having that particular timestamp out here. And then if you just scroll down, you also have things like what is your access tier, telling that this is default access tier, which is in hot, and it is telling public access enabled and all these things out here. Good. And then in the left hand corner, you have something called activity log. And activity log kind of tracks all the activities that you do on this particular storage account. Anything. For example, I went ahead and created a storage account around 10 minutes ago. And this is telling this event was initiated by something or someone known as classes Azure DevOps at gmail.com. And they have created your storage account out here. And also, if I just scroll down, there is this one called access management. Did we see this anytime? Access management in bracket identity and access control, subscription and all these things out, which
Yes,
means that
subscription resources.
subscription resources, exactly, resource group, each and every resource carries this identity and access management, which means that if you have a model something like this, wherein you have a tenant, you have a subscription, you have a single resource group, and inside this resource group, let's say you can create multiple storage accounts out here. So it's now a tree model out here that I'm, let's say, identifying. So you can have multiple storage accounts inside that particular resource group. And let's say that there are three users, a developer, a QA, and a DevOps engineer. Developer only wants access on a storage account called this one. QA only wants access here. DevOps only wants access here. You can do granular level access by going in here, again say add role assignment, and in here again owner, contributor, reader. If you don't want to give higher roles, you can say storage accounts, just say storage. You have storage account contributor, which is telling you, lets you manage storage including accessing the storage keys and provides full access to your, let's say, data. Then you have, if you just want to only, let's say, go ahead and allow someone to just read and write your storage accounts, there's something called storage blob data contributor, blob data owner, and all that stuff. You can do something known as a granular role, so that the user, whoever you assign here, will be able to see the subscription but no role, will be able to see the resource group but no role, and inside this resource group, this user will only be able to see this particular storage account, which is one. This user will be only able to see the second. This user will only be able to see the third storage account as such. So you can now start doing some granular roles out here, telling, okay, fine, you know what, this is the only storage that I need. And also, let's say if someone wants a read access on all the storage accounts, then very simple, you can take that user, put him as a reader on the resource group as such out here. So you can do granular level accesses by telling what kind of a role someone has on a storage account, and this is available under the identity and access management of a particular storage account out here. This is something that you will be seeing across Azure. This is a blade that you'll be seeing across Azure. You saw this in subscription, you saw this in resource group, you'll see this in storage accounts, virtual machines, web application, whatever that you create, you will have this particular rule, or you'll have this particular, let's say, option to take someone and just assign the role out here as such. And if I just scroll down, there are a couple of options like data migrations, event, storage, browser, and etc. But what I want to go into is something known as a data storage options out here. See, the main thing that you create a storage account is to hold the data, is to store data, which I've not gone under, which I will now go under. And to store your data, storage account is now telling that, you know, you have 4 different options to go ahead and store your data in the form of something called containers, file shares, queues, and tables. Queues and tables are very less used options when you can store, let's say, semi-structured data. Containers and file shares are one of the most widely used options out here. So what I'll do, I'll start with containers today. I'll see what containers really are. So let me go there, and I'm now creating something called as container out here. So now storage account is like the disk that will hold your data, and containers are like subfolders inside the storage account. Containers are simply but something like a subfolders where you can categorize what kind of a data you can store in, let's say the access that someone has and etc. So container level or container level access management can also be done. You can also go ahead, create a container and give someone the access just on that particular container out here so that you can segregate your data. But in order to start storing your data, you at least need one container out here. So container is that particular object within a particular storage account wherein you can start, let's say, going ahead and uploading all your data. And what kind of a data? Unstructured. We call this as a blob data. B-L-O-B, blob data out here. Binary large object. Binary zeros and ones, unstructured. So this is a binary large object data is what you store. Any file that you are calling a file, Microsoft calls it as a blob. That's the biggest difference. That's the only difference out here that you are, let's say, kind of dealing with. So what I'll do is I'll come into my storage service, and this is the overview page, and I'll just scroll down into data storage options, and I'll say create a container out here. I'll say create. Now it's telling me, okay, fine, this is the container you have. Give me the name of the container. I'll say, okay, fine, this is a test container, something that I'm putting in. And there's something very important called public access level. It's telling what is your public access level. What I will do right now is I will select the default option called private. I'll explain what private is once I upload the file. I'll say private, and in the bracket it's telling no anonymous access. We'll understand what this is, and I'll say create this out. We'll take a second to go ahead, create a container out here. So I now have a storage account. Inside a storage account, I now have something known as a container. Inside the container is where I can go ahead and upload my data in the form of something called blobs. So I'll go there. And let me say, click on this particular option called upload. I'll say upload. And in here, it's asking me, where is your file? Do you want to upload this out? I'll say yes, upload this out. And what I'll do is that I have few images. So I'll just go ahead, get those images and upload this out. So I have multiple images out here that you see on my screen. So I can click all of them or a few of them. And I am now going ahead and I'm telling, okay, fine, I am uploading something called sample1, sample3, blob, and etc. Random. I'll say upload. And now if you give it a second, it's going to go ahead, upload all these files. And please observe this. It's uploading all these files into an access tier called what? Hot. Because your storage account is sitting in something known as hot. In the bracket, it has something called what? Inferred, meaning the storage account is sitting in hot. So I'm, let's say, inferring from the storage account and uploading these files. And the blob type that gets uploaded is called as a block blob. One of the very common types of blobs that is used, which gets me or which gives me the types of the blob that I need to explain, which are three different things out here. One is called as a block blob, very common type. All your unstructured data, your files, your videos, images, whatever that you see will get uploaded, and they sit in a type called as a block blob. Then you have something called as a page blob. Page here just means that it will hold something called as a .vhd files. When I say a .vhd, it's called as a virtual hard drive files. So later in our sessions, when we look at something called as a virtual machine service, the virtual machine creates something known as a .vhd file to, let's say, store all its backup, and that backup is stored inside a page blob of a storage account out here. And then you have something called append blob, all the log information. Now in Azure, later you go and create multiple services like application services, hosting services, and etc., which constantly generate a lot of logs, and these logs needs to be stored somewhere. All these logs are stored inside something known as a storage account in the form of append blobs. So this is nothing but a classification for Microsoft to understand what kind of a data are you doing. Is it a .vhd information? So I'll, let's say, treat it separately. If it's in, let's say, log information, then I need to treat it a little different. If it's the general information, then go with something known as a blob storage out here. Again, this is something that I haven't selected. This is something that Microsoft decided and then went ahead and, let's say, said what kind of a storage or what kind of, let's say, a file this is. So now what I'll do is, since I uploaded this file, what I want to do right now is that I have a class that is online which is running. I want to share this file with them. I want to go ahead and share this particular file with them. So I'll just click on this particular file or click on this particular blob, which is the right terminology to use. As and when I do that, under the properties, I have something called URL, unique resource link, for this particular file. Let me copy this out. Let me go into the notepad and paste this out here. And if you look at this URL and inspect this carefully, firstly, it is telling HTTPS accessible over the internet, hypertext transfer protocol and all that stuff. Then you have the dev irctc USEs2, which is nothing but the name of your storage account dot blob, the kind of service that you're doing. It's a blob service, it's a blob container dot core dot windows dot net. This entire thing is called as an FQDN, fully qualified domain name of a storage account service. It's called as a fully qualified domain name. Just like you have google.com, which is a fully qualified domain name of a company called Google. For a storage service, Microsoft is telling, okay, fine, this is the fully qualified domain name that I'm giving, forward slash the container name, which is test container, forward slash the blob name. So let me go ahead and take this link. Since I have this link, this is great to go ahead and share data with, let's say, everyone online. So let me go ahead, send it across, send this link across in the chat. And I'll also go ahead, use an incognito window, put this link here, and try accessing this particular blob out here. And this is the error that I get. So not the error, but kind of information that I get, which is telling me that the XML file doesn't appear or doesn't have information, or it's telling the specified resource does not really exist inside your storage account, but it does exist, right? This blob, which is called sample1, it does exist. I just uploaded it just a few seconds ago. Then why do you think I'm getting this particular information out here? We selected private over there. Exactly. We selected something called private as an access level for the container, which means that no one can just come here, give that link, and access your data. No, you cannot do that because the blob is sitting in private. But what I can do is that if I just go back into my containers, I can click on this container and click on change access level. Apart from private, there are two other things called container access and also called individual blob access out here. What I'll do is I'll put in something known as container level access, which is now telling me that anonymous read access for containers and blobs are allowed. Meaning both for your container and the blob sitting inside your container, you have a read access out here. And I will say, okay, and I'll just leave this the way it is. So I just changed the access level now to something called as a container level access out here. And I'll just go back to the same URL and just do a refresh of my screen. And I am able to get this particular data out here in the form of an image, which means that if I just give this URL to someone, I just go ahead give this URL to someone sitting in any corner of the world, they'll just go ahead be able to hit this, get that particular data out here. This kind of an access level is very famously used in public sites. Like for example, how many of y'all have actually went ahead into Telangana police portal and paid a challan for one of your traffic violations? Did you do that? Everyone, right? Almost everyone, even me including. If you go into that particular portal, you could put your bike number or a car number, and in the end of it, you say where is your violation and all that stuff. They'll give you an image, right? That image is hosted somewhere like this, or that image is hosted inside one of the storage accounts of this. So what really happens out here is that you have backend, let's say administrators who put all that data inside the containers. You have an application called e-challan portal or something like that, and you're a user just going inside this particular portal, giving your number, and when you give your bike number and etc., that in the background, the application in the background converts it into the container name and the blob name, goes inside this particular storage account. The application now knows what is the backend storage account out here, goes inside the container of the storage account. Okay, let's put the name of the container out here, container of that particular storage account, looks for that particular file, which is in the form of, let's say, image or something, or I would say blob in my case, goes ahead, takes this out, sends it to the storage account, and the storage account sends it to the application in return sends it to you. This is how the delivery mechanism happens, and then you'll finally be able to see this particular image out here. Not by this particular URL, but it will be something like e-challan / something something something, and you would get this particular image out here as such. This is how you go ahead and send across your data publicly. Again, this also can be, let's say, used as a file share mechanism, when I have huge files. I want to send it across, let's say, multiple consumers of my, let's say, application out here. I can send across this particular URL and they'll be able to go inside this particular URL, grab all my data and all that stuff. So this is how the container kind of works out here. So I'll take a quick pause. Any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here? Again, if I want to access that sample 3 image, right? I'll just go here. I'll say instead of sample 1, I'll change my URL to sample 3, hit this. Able to get, let's say, I'm able to get, let's say, a different image out there. So if the blob exists inside your container, and if the container, let's say, access level is something like container access level or blob access level, you are allowing the users to access all your data via some kind of a public URL that is available out there.
Hi, can we select multiple images?
Can we select multiple images? Again, when you say multiple images, do you mean here?
We'll get a slide to show.
Okay. Okay, just a second. I'll just come back. I'll just come back to that question. There's a follow-up. I'll just take that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's okay. 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 So if I don't want, I have 10 images. I don't want all the 10 images for the public access. Can I do that? If it's sitting inside the container, which has a container level access, you can't. That's the reason we create multiple containers, put private container individually so that all the blobs that are sitting in private will not have access publicly. All the blobs that are sitting in container level will have the access publicly out here. One more question that is online is that can I select everything? Like meaning if I go here, do you mean if I click on next, I get the next image or something like that?
Yes, yes.
Again, see, this is a URL. I'm not accessing the image with a common link. This is a URL of the image, and each and every image or each and every blob will have its own URL out here. You cannot, let's say, go ahead and look at everything at one go using your
Okay.
browser. Using the browser, you cannot do it, but using softwares like something called as Storage Explorer, Microsoft Storage Explorer, you can go ahead and let's say manage your data at one go, which we will get into on data management and everything.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions out here?
Okay, Suresh, this is single image. But what about Salesforce? There will be huge data. No?
Hmm.
If we click on the
There,
URL, their
okay,
name, contact number, email ID, everything will be there. No?
correct, correct. So can you follow up your question? I'm sorry. Can you complete that question out there?
See in the sales here, if you click one URL, you will getting one image. No? In Salesforce, there will be so many, like 10 to 20 customers number example.
Okay,
So how
okay.
you can check?
When you say again, when you say if you want to check multiple images out here, depends upon the application that you're designing out here. The application, see, you're not actually going, when you say it's an end user, it's let's say an end user like a public that you're giving this image to, you will not, let's say, directly give across the URL of that particular image. You will have all the URLs that is placed inside this application. You will design a front end application for it. And once you click on that particular front end application saying, okay, fine, I want to see this image, you'll just go to the background, look for that particular container, look for that particular image, and send it back across to you. So you need to design something like a console application out here. This is an area where you just store the data. To expose the data, then yes, your applications, your logic, and all these things come into picture. Okay. Are they able to download? Yes, they will be able to download. So it's files, logs. Yes, I can do it. Just go ahead, click, do a right click as a copy image, download image, save image as. And if I do a save images, it'll tell you where you want to store this out. Yes, you can download this out. You can also download it from your browser directly. Can you restrict that? No, because this is publicly exposed. Yes. Okay. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Good question. Can I directly give the container URL? Yes, you can give the container URL as well. Sure, but if I do that, for example, let's say there is something called shared access tokens and etc. that I get into. But if I expose the container URL, for example, let's say this is the properties of the container, and this is the URL of the container, which is HTTPS, something like this. If I copy this out, go into my browser, I'm trying to access this out here, I'll get this error. Reason being, you're not specifying a file name that you want to access out here or a blob name that you want to access out here. In order to do this, you'll need a data management software. The browser cannot handle this request. The browser just knows that, okay, fine, you're going there. But after that, the browser will not be able to handle this request, for which you need something like software called Microsoft Storage Explorer. So it's a data management software that you get, which we will go into understand what is the software about and how do you handle the data and etc. But yes, if it's a bulk data, which your developers want to, or which your testers want to, let's say, access out here, you kind of give this particular software out here again. So again, one thing that we have to understand is that, see, this is a pure business perspective, let's say, accounts out here. It's not consumer perspective. So that's the reason you won't be able to see everything at one go. If you want to do that, you need a developer to develop you an application which will go inside the storage account, grab all the data, and let's say give it to you on a front end. It can be possible. That can be done. But directly on a browser, no. You cannot do it directly on a browser. You will need to download such a kind of a software and install that out. And then using this particular software, you'll need to look at the data out there. The software, yes, this is covered as a part of this one. Like this covered, meaning you can download the software. It's a free software. I'll also explain how to download, how to install, and how to, let's say, use this up. This is one of the important classes that I need to do out there. Yes, any more questions here? Okay, one thing that I want you all to try, guys, is that over the weekend, see, there are about 7 blobs that you upload. You uploaded it out. Change it back to private. I don't want my container to be sitting in a container level access. My organization is now telling me that, you know what, you're not allowed to, let's say, expose your data to the public, but I still want a capability to go ahead and look at my data over the, let's say, browser or over the internet in a controlled way. This is the error that you get as and when you switch it back to private. But do some Google search around this. Let me know if the container is sitting in a private access. How do you access the data? What do you generate to access the data is something that I want you all to, let's say, go ahead and look into. All right. So this would be the assignment for you all. And the next session will be on a Monday. So since Saturday and Sunday we do not have a class, the next session will be on a Monday. So please look into this, and in between, if you get any doubts, please send across emails and I'll respond back to that.
Hi, Karan. One quick question.
Good, please.
Yeah. Now you pasted that URL in a browser, but it showed error, right? Previously, it
Correct.
displayed the image. Can you tell me
Correct.
the difference?
Reason being, the access level was different. Previously, the access level was something known as a container access level, which will allow you to expose all your data. Sorry.
No. You have a question on offline, right? You directly can we give
Mhm.
the link like that?
So the question that I asked is that I have my container in private, but
Okay.
I still want to access my data.
Okay. Then
So
it will show error. Yeah.
yes,
Okay. Right.
yes,
Thank you.
that's something that I wanted you all to try out.
Okay.
Okay, let's take one quick question out here. Can I know the difference between storage in data, okay, storing the data in SQL Server and Azure? Again, you can also create a SQL Server in Azure too. There is not a lot of difference out there, but here in a SQL database, you store something called as a structured data. In storage accounts, you store and expose something called as an unstructured data. That's the biggest difference. It's a NoSQL storage account that you do have. So if you store your data in SQL Server, you will need to know the language of SQL in order to interact with the data. You need to write queries of SQL to interact with the data. This is a NoSQL container. You don't need to have the knowledge of SQL. You just can come here and interact with your unstructured data as such. All right. Thank you guys and have a good weekend ahead. And we'll meet on Monday and we'll discuss more on this. Thank you.